Welcome everybody, welcome to Irie Talks. It is your girl Irie. Irie, this is the girl. And we're back again. Through the grace of the universe and God, we're back again. We are in Makanda, Grahamstown. And we're back with a new episode. I'm very, very happy, very grateful for this episode. In this episode, we're actually literally showing you who the guest is. But before we get into that, please do like, subscribe, comment down below, hit that notification button so you know when I'm dropping again, because clearly this is my job now. It's my job. So yeah, we are here with a very, very special guest. He is a conceptual artist, a filmmaker, a creative director. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Lithemba Nziweni. I'm a conceptual artist. Mainly use photography as a tool or the medium that I use, or rather I use photography as the medium to express my conceptual artistry. I'm a Makanda-based artist, but I am from Alice. Home is the surrounding villages of Alice. Alice is a town. Asaki is the village that I'm from in the surrounding villages of Alice. So, yes.
Okay. So we're going to start with like some icebreaker questions. If you were here for the last episode, you would know this is something we do. But we're going to start with some icebreaker questions, nothing too hectic, and then we'll get into like the deep things, the reason why we're here. Question number 1, if you could have one meal for the rest of your life, which meal would it be?
Anything pasta related.
Oh.
Yeah.
Why?
I love pasta.
Like even seafood pasta?
Anything pasta. Literally anything that goes well with pasta, I would have it for the rest of my life, without a doubt.
So not even like rice, pap?
No.
Oh.
If it was one food for the rest of my life,
yeah,
pasta.
No.
Pasta and something. Whatever goes well with pasta and that. So pasta and mince,
okay,
pasta and seafood,
yeah,
pasta and what, chicken, pasta,
yeah,
whatever. Pasta and
just
something.
Pasta.
Just
okay.
pasta. Yeah.
Wow. I thought maybe you'd say like pap.
Pap.
Like,
who would want to have pap for the rest of their life? Every day.
I also wouldn't.
Every day.
I also wouldn't.
No, not pap. At least with
not every day.
At least with pap, it's very what's the word? Versatile.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's not too hard. Mm-hmm. It's not too boring. Mm-hmm. You know, if you want boring, you can get boring. If you want extravagant, you can do extravagant.
Yeah.
You know, if you want simple, you can get simple. It's a versatile meal.
Pap.
No.
Pasta. Oh, okay. And then if you only had one medium to use for the rest of your life, which medium would it be?
Photography, digital photography specifically. Yeah. I mean, it was my introduction to what I call art today. It's the one thing that I'm very well versed in. I love it. There's so much fun with digital photography. Not to say that anything else is any less fun, but that's just what I'm more familiar with. Mm-hmm. So it would be that I've been doing photography for a very long time, up until now, and it still hasn't gotten any boring for me. Mm-hmm. In fact, it just gets more exciting. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That makes sense. And then, what is your favorite art period?
What? Art period?
Mm-hmm.
Art period?
Yeah, like art movement or like an art period.
Oh,
like
art period.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm not an art student. Hey, for me, art has been like a means of self-expression. Art was never anything I did on a formal medium or on a formal basis. Art for me has always been a means of self-expression. So similar to how people use journaling, that's art for me. So I've never really went to school for it. So I can't really speak on my favorite. What did you say?
Art period.
Art period, because I've never delved that deep into art where I was trying to figure out what my favorite art period is. Mm-hmm. In fact, it's only recently that I started referring to myself as an artist, because I didn't believe I was an artist because of the reasons I did art. You know, it didn't feel like it didn't feel adequate enough for me to call myself as an artist if I'm using art purely for self-expression purposes. You know, there are artists who are actually like out there doing art for completely different reasons. So yeah, I can't really answer that because they speak nothing to what I do. Yeah.
But don't you think like that's sort of like the beauty of art? Because then you have artists that did not necessarily use the traditional route to become an artist. You know what I mean? That didn't, like you're saying, that you didn't study art as a degree, but you are a creative, you are an artist. So I think, there's a beauty to it.
I think so. I think my work looks the way that it does and speaks to what it speaks to, very much informed by the fact that I had no formal training. I think it looks the way that it does. It's edited the way that it does. It speaks on those particular subject matters because they're so personal to me. I think my art has a lot of personal touches to it as compared to technical and formal touches to it, and I guess that's what people see as the beauty of the art that I create, but also the beauty of the art that people who didn't necessarily go to school create, because it almost speaks to you directly because it's from a personal kind of perspective.
And then you have one option. You need to pick. This is going to be tough because you do follow artists, right?
I do. Like on social media?
Yeah.
I do.
You do have your
I do.
favorite
I do.
artists, right?
I do.
So this is like one of those.
Sure.
You have to pick one.
Sure.
Right? So you first have Zanele Muholi or Kiyu Sangli.
So I'm picking on the basis.
One of them.
Why am I picking?
I don't know. Just picking.
I'm just picking.
Yeah.
I'm picking my favorite artist between the two.
Or just one you'd prefer.
One I prefer.
Yeah.
I'd say Zanele Muholi because I not know her personally, but I've met her on a personal capacity and she's helped me out quite a lot in my own journey. So Zanele Muholi.
I think this is like my little chance to just say, hey, Zanele Muholi. And then Sam Klingetwa or William Kendrick.
I have no idea who those people are.
Okay. I'll get you like a book.
Okay.
I'll get you a book of Sam Klingetwa and William.
Do that.
But Sam Klingetwa is like he's a photographer. Not really a photographer like based artist, but photography based artist. But he deals with collage, he deals with painting, and just merging the two. And he merges it so beautifully that it looks like one picture. So yeah. And then William Kendrick is like, he's like the god of art.
God of art.
Literally, literally he does printmaking, filmmaking, animation. What else? Charcoal. Like there's nothing that guy doesn't do. Okay, and then Andrew Shabangu or Andile Bala.
Andrew Shabangu, Andile Bala. I'll go with Andile Bala. I'm more familiar with their work.
I'm so happy you know it. And then last one, photography or printmaking?
Photography.
Okay.
Yeah. Easy. That's an easy one.
Would you ever, literally, explore with another medium?
I would. I'm a filmmaker as well. It's just that I guess that side of me, I haven't fully developed that skill of filmmaking, but it's a skill that I'm actively trying to refine. So I am actively getting into filmmaking because I think for me that is the next natural progression from being a photographer to be someone who's making movies, because that's what I'd like to do. I'd like to make documentaries, feature films, hopefully one day, God allows. So
Because he does.
Yeah, for sure. So that's definitely the next medium I would like to explore after photography, or even in the process of exploring photography. But that's definitely something I want to delve into the further I pursue my artistry as a creative.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's nice. I like how you're not limited, and you're not also you're not boxed to using artistic medium. You know what I mean? Like there's a lot that separates you from the traditional artist, if that makes sense. Then I think now enough waiting to get into heritage and get into why, the how, the when, the what, the who, and like how did the concept of heritage originate, and what was the decision behind it in like just creating a full-on series of work that communicates to a large community.
I think heritage speaks to quite a number of things. So I think the first one is just the whole concept of just being a human being and being just the concept of humanity, right? So before I'm a photographer and before I'm an artist, I'm a human being. And before Hairitage became an artistic expression, it was literally just conversations I was having with people. Not even in an artistic space, but just general conversations. But before those were conversations I started having with people, there were an internal investigation on my own relationship I had with my own hair. Because I was alone. I don't know what exactly I was doing, but literally the train of thought happened in a split second, right? So Hairitage was conceptualized almost in a split second. But I was thinking about how over the course of my life, over the duration of my life, I had adopted different personalities with the different hairstyles that I had on my head over the years, right? And thinking about how those different hairstyles influenced the person I was at the time and influenced, I guess, the period or was an identifying factor in the period I was in my life. And my hairstyle had a lot to do with that identity that came with whoever I became during that period in my life. So I was thinking about how there was a time in my life where I had little to no agency over what I did on my hair because, I couldn't make those decisions. My mom was the person that was, mainly making the decisions as to what I would wear to school, what hair I would have. So in a sense, that felt like to me upon reflection, a way that my mom basically dictated how I perceived myself and how the world perceived me. And I do think that how you look and how the world sort of looks at you just in a physical sense speaks a lot to your identity because they attach whatever they attach based on how you look just in a physical form. So that in its own does become your identity, whether you're conscious of it or not, because it's how people speak about you, right? Even in how you perceive yourself when you look yourself in the mirror, the things you say to yourself, that eventually becomes your identity. And I think what we think of ourselves is also partly based on how we look, and how we look determines how we feel. So my mom was basically the one person that basically dictated a huge part of my identity because she told me what I needed to look like based on what hair or hairstyle she felt like was the standard of beauty at the time. So that particular period in my life marked a particular identity that I had, which was a child who had almost no control over their identity or how they are perceived or how they even perceive themselves, right? And then that influenced who I was, even though I wasn't conscious of it at the time because I was literally just a child. And then going from that to, I'd say, fast forwarding to me being still a kid, but now I'm in high school. I'm a young kid who's getting into his teenage years. And I remember beginning of my high school, I went to like what you would call like a traditional former Model C school. And at the time, yes, we weren't the first cohort of black kids, but it was still very much a predominantly white and Afrikaans school and white Afrikaans systems within that institution, right? And even within that school, there was absolutely no teacher of color, no colored teacher, no black teacher. It was just white and Afrikaans teachers, right? So even in how they've conceptualized the world that they live in was completely different to the world that us as black kids lived in. So even in the formation of the rules, they didn't speak to our lived experiences. They spoke to their lived experiences. And it also spoke a lot on their prejudices and stereotypes on other people outside of their own race, right? So even in the rules that they had for black kids and how they needed to wear their hair was completely different to our white friends and classmates that we had at school. And I remember realizing that there's so much policing when it comes to our hair because I remember this one time I walked in class with a fade haircut. And I was told that I needed to go back home and change the hairstyle because it wasn't allowed. And I remember trying to convince the white teachers that, look, the hairstyle that I have on my head is the same hairstyle that Uchad and Tristan and this kid and Richard, when we walk into the barber shop, we ask for exactly the same hairstyle, right? So there was a lot of policing, which I didn't know was actually discrimination at the time because there's certain things that we were allowed to do, certain things that we weren't allowed to do, but certain things that our white classmates were allowed to do, like even in things like how you wear your hair. And there's not that much difference. The only difference is the texture of our hair. Outside of that, it's literally the same hairstyle. So that period in my life marked a very rebellious nature within me in that particular system, because I didn't even know it at the time, but I was fighting against whatever was happening there. I just didn't have the language for it, but I just knew that it didn't feel right that I was forced to go back home and change my hairstyle, but no one else was forced to go back home to change their hairstyle, right? So there was this rebellious nature that I sort of adopted, and rebellious personality and mannerisms that I sort of adopted, and my hair was an instrumental tool within the personality that I took up in that particular space. So those two instances and two experiences for me, that's when I realized that no, man, like in Lithemba, they played such an instrumental part in the people that I became. I just wasn't aware of it at the time, right? So essentially that's when I really started investigating the relationship that I had with my hair and how it played a part to who I was and who I became as a person, and still the person that I still want to become, and how hair plays a part in that, you know. And there was a time where I started getting into photography and just looking into what being an artist was, what being a creative was. I had no background of what art was, what being a creative was. But when I started looking into it, because what I was doing, people around me started calling it art and creativity, started referring to me as an artist, but I didn't feel like an artist. I didn't feel like a creative, right? Because I had no background or reference to what that meant for me. But when I started getting into this world, I started looking into artists and how they behaved and just how they dress and how they carry themselves. I saw a lot of eccentricism in how they wore their clothes, for example, in their fashion sense, but also how they wore their hair. Like, artists are very experimental people. They're very expressive people. So I started seeing that, oh no, man, all these people that call themselves artists, like all of them have got like blonde hair or white hair or this kind of hair or dreads, you know, but they're very stylized kind of dreads, you know, like their hairstyles are very expressive of who they are. So yes, so I felt like if I also dye my hair, I'd start feeling more like an artist. I'd adopt artist personalities, artist traits, artist behaviors, and it would influenced me to start embodying being an artist. Because at the time, I think maybe it had a lot to do with insecurity, because I was around a lot of people who identified as artists and I just wasn't identifying as an artist, and everyone just felt so different to me in how they spoke, you know, the way that, in how they spoke, how they walked, their fashion sense. I think that period also just spoke to, I guess, the stereotypes that I had put onto artists, because, you know, you're not just an artist because you dye your hair, you're not just an artist because you wear thrifted clothing, or you're not just an artist because you speak the language of art. You're an artist because you're someone who knows how to bring an idea to life, you know. It's just that at the time I wasn't aware what it is outside of the surface level and the superficial idea of what I thought an artist was. So I think at that point in me thinking about how instrumental hair was to me, that was the period where I started getting into photography, and I thought that at least if I dye my hair, I'd feel more of an artist. So these were the internal thoughts I was having at the time, way before Hairitage became an artistic expression. There were just internal conversations I was having with myself, investigating how hair played a part in my identity, and then from those conversations they progressed into me having conversations with people I found myself around. So, like, again, not just my friends, but people I'd been in conversation with about just regular life stuff. And I'd bring up the conversation about how hair has played a part in my life, and just trying to figure out if they relate to the same sentiments that I just relate to you about, like the different ways in which hair played a part when I was a child, with my mom having the agency as to dictate what my identity was going to be, me adopting a very rebellious nature and a very rebellious attitude within that schooling institution that I was in, just trying to figure out if other people related to that story and those sentiments. And I found that, okay, there's a lot of people who relate to the concept of what I'm talking about, but they have different different experiences, similar to my experiences, but they experienced completely different things, and they started bringing up different experiences that I never would have even imagined, hair could play a part in, or hair would be instrumental in, so from those conversations with people I found myself around, I started having the conversations with my close circle of friends, so a close circle of people rather. So that would be like my mom, my dad, my siblings, my friends, and then from those conversations progressed into me having conversations with my creative community. So whenever I find myself on set and shooting, or maybe it's a gig, or it's a collaboration between me and another artist, I would bring up the conversation of heritage, and at this point I had the title of it, I just wasn't saying it, but I was having the same conversations with everyone I could have the conversation with, until it got to a point where I wanted to see if I could try to not replicate, but try and depict these conversations I was having with people in a photography format, because I was a photographer at the time, and I was, I guess, looking for something to challenge me, and looking for different ways in which I could express whatever I was going through. And these conversations around heritage and hair stories were an occurring theme in my life, and there were an occurring conversation I was having with people from different walks of life. So I just used those conversations to get me to do something different and something challenging as a photographer, and that's how Hairitage was birthed.
Wow. What? I just want to take us back a little bit to what you said of your mom sort of dictating how you do your hair. I think a lot of us, immediately when you said that, I just resonated. I related immediately, because my grandmother would do exactly the same thing. I'd definitely look at other kids in like primary school, not even primary school, like high school, not primary school, I'm right, primary school, and they would have these slick back, because I went to a colored school, and the coloreds would have, their curly hair in like afro form, the slick back ponytail, just very experimental with their hair. The black kids would have braids, or like straight up. Like I definitely wanted all of that, but my grandmother dictated everything in my life, and I think that part is just so, it's sort of sacred, because it's a part of you that you do not know, but you are living. Do you know what I'm saying? And yeah, I think it's interesting how we all resonate, and this is what brings me to my next question, that how do you feel with, like, what is it like working with people? No, that's not the question. How did you feel when you saw the project resonating with a community and building a community? Because immediately when I saw Hairitage live, I was like, yeah, this is definitely something I resonate with, especially after you gave me the explanation that you did now. I was like, yeah, this is definitely, I fit somewhere in here. So like, how do you feel about that? Having a community of people that agree with what you're saying, and that are also looking into pursuing conversations about it, not just within the restraints of the gallery, but also outside, the gallery.
Like I said, before it was an artistic expression, it was conversation. So I think it's always been a community thing, because I think once I started seeing the thread of common factors in terms of the stories that we related to when it comes to our hair, specifically when it comes to the black lived experience, because I can't speak on the white experience because I'm not a white person, but I started connecting the dots in terms of what it was that we were connecting with, and I realized that this project, one, had to embody more than just a telling of traumatic stories, because that was not the only conversation I was having with people. Like, for example, for me, I've always known, even from like reflecting back on the time where my mom dictated how I needed to look like, that it had nothing to do with ill intentions. It was just my mom saying, hey, this is how young boys are looking like now. I think you also, this is how you're going to present yourself.
Neat look.
Exactly. There was a time where ES curl was like a thing, and
I was
everyone.
one of them girls.
I was doing it as curl as well because it was like a common hairstyle, that
Period.
like young kids and young boys used to have, so it had no ill intentions, even though it had certain ramifications that my mom wasn't cognizant about when it came to my identity, right? And even in the, I think my traumatic experience when it comes to my hair was when I was in the former Model C school, and that was happening. But I remember just feeling just so frustrated, right? And there was a lot of people feeling the same thing, like the girls in my class, for example, like they were very policed in terms of what they needed to do with their hair. There was so many rules when it came to young black girls' hair as to you can't do the braids, you can't do this, you can't do that. If you come to school looking like this, it's unneat. If you come with your afro, certain things don't need to be sticking out, or things like that. But at the time, we're like, oh no, these are school rules. But there was a lot of frustration amongst all of us that we couldn't really find the language for, until I saw, I don't know if you know Zulekha Patel or if you know her story, but Zulekha Patel was a young girl who went to Pretoria Girls High, and she was protesting against the school's rules so that she could come to school wearing her fro, because she wasn't allowed to come to school wearing. So she was not an activist, but she protested against it. And when I saw that, I was also still in high school. I think she was just a couple of years older than me, but we were in high school around the same time. And when I saw this girl that looked like me, and I was around my same age group, and we were in high school at the same time, I realized right there and then what I was going through, and it was discrimination and racism. But we didn't know we didn't have the concept of what racism was in real time, right? Like
Post.
No. I think no. We knew what racism was as a concept, but from a very far kind of perspective. Like racism was apartheid, for example, for us when I was in high school, right? Because I had no reference to what racism was. My only reference to what racism was the apartheid era. Zulekha Patel on TV, and just reading more into that story, just reading the articles, and just watching her talk about it, and just watching all the other reviews post that, what the headlines were saying, what SABC was saying, what ENCA was saying, because I used to watch the news a lot when I was in high school. That gave me the language of what I was also experiencing, because it was basically the same thing. I was also fighting for the right to wear my hair exactly how my hair was in its natural format, right? But I wasn't allowed to do that. The girls in high school weren't allowed to do that. So that gave me the understanding of what I was also going through, because it was more systematic racism than it was like racism in your face and people calling you all kinds of things. It wasn't that kind of racism, and that's the racism that exactly. But you're not taught how to sort of decipher that level of discrimination, and the racism that we knew was, bro, like these people are chasing you with a shambok and they're asking you to leave your house. But it wasn't that experience, right? I grew up in a predominantly, in fact, not even predominantly, I grew up in a black neighborhood. I grew up with black parents, no white neighbors, nothing like that. So racism was extremely far-fetched for me up until I went into that school, right? So I think what I'm getting at with this was that there was a common thread in terms of our hair stories and what our hair stories meant to us as young black kids, but also as black people. So I think that's where the sense of community started accumulating as I was having these conversations with the different people, and I started seeing a common thread in terms of how significant hair was to us in our stories as black people, but also our lived experiences and what hair represented in terms of our identity as well. So having different conversations around the context of culture, for example, and what hair means to us within the context of culture. As umXhosa, what hair represents to me in a cultural perspective, there's particular symbolisms attached to that. When I also underwent my rite of passage going from boyhood to manhood, which is a transition called ukwaluka, hair plays a significant part within that process. So having conversations around hair in a traditional and cultural context, having conversations around hair in a professional context, the whole concept of what is deemed as professional hair. We all know what professional hair looks like, and it doesn't look like how we wear our hair in its natural format. Having conversations around hair in relation to, I guess, a romantic kind of context and the role that hair plays within that kind of dynamic where I was having conversations around how when you wear your hair, it attracts different kind of romantic suitors. Like if when a guy, for example, as a lady, bald, if your hair is bald, like if you go bald, you attract completely different people as compared to if you wear your hair, if you have braids, for example, like the people you attract romantically, completely different human beings who come from completely different walks of life, you know. So having all of these conversations around the stories that our hair holds, but also the lived experiences that our hair exposes us to, you know. So I think because of the various conversations and the diverse conversations that I was having with different people, it built a sense of community because I could relate to your story even though I haven't been through the things that you've been through, but I can understand because I'm also a black person, so I can understand how you'd go through that. So I think when I started collecting the stories and putting them in photography and sharing them on social media, that started even building an even bigger sense of community because now I wasn't just the person who was relating to these stories. It was people who were outside of my own close circle of friends and people outside of this particular room where we were having these conversations. People in Joburg, Cape Town, Australia, wherever, when they were watching these stories unfold and when they were reading the narratives around the images, you started having different people relating to these stories. So I think over time, because I continuously did and created the project and continuously put it out on social media, it created its own community. And by the time we had the exhibition, that community that was accumulating over social media was represented in people actually coming and seeing this come to life. So I think that's how it gathered the community that you saw either on social media or in person when you came to the exhibition. Yeah,
I mean, the first community I saw, it's so weird because community, when we think of community, we think of more than one person.
Yeah.
And the first community I saw was that female that I was talking to when I first met you.
Yeah.
And she said, listen, it's everywhere. And I was like, it's a community. One person identifying that you do have a solid foundational community that is not shakeable. You know what I mean? And I saw that and I recognized it. I lost my train of thought. I was going to ask something. It's gone. But anyway, back to the exhibition. So I could be wrong. I stand to be corrected. However, with the idea behind exhibitions and solo exhibitions, obviously Hairitage was a solo exhibition for all Lithemba Nziweni, right? Tell me, how did you navigate that? Because in the art world, or in the art world, when you have a solo exhibition, you've reached a certain level of your artistic practice. You know what I mean? Your first appearance as an artist in the art world was a solo exhibition, right? And not a group show. What was the decision behind that? To the decision of a solo exhibition and not a group exhibition.
See, even what you're saying, I have no concept of it because I like to think of myself of someone who is art, who is who's moving adjacent to the art industry. So I do know that there's certain...
Wait, stop, don't move.
It's just an insect, bro. You look like you just saw a snake.
Terrestrial.
Yo,
Alien.
and you're letting it walk on you.
What an exhibition. It literally wanted to be part and parcel of the exhibition. I think it also had of the interview.
Can I just say you're a better person than me?
Yay!
Listen on the ground under my shoe.
So I don't know. I like to think of myself as industry adjacent because we're so fortunate to be in Makanda where there's no there's no pressure of conforming to whatever the standard or whatever the status quo is in the industry. Like here you make up your own rules, bro. Like as an artist, you can decide what works for you, what doesn't work for you, what you want to do, what you don't want to do. So for me, because one, I'm not a learned student when it comes to art, and two, I'm not actively working within the industry, I had to create my own concept of what being an artist was and what it meant to me, right? So I had to conceptualize what being an artist is. Also, I think maybe it was largely informed by, I guess, my own insecurities at the time, where I had to be like, oh, okay, me who didn't go to art school, me who doesn't have an art background, me who doesn't feel like I'm an artist, what does my career look like, or what is my career going to look like? So I think from then I needed to sort of carve my own path, which is, I think, is what I did up until this point. So what an exhibition means to me is completely different to what an exhibition might mean to Umdu who's always known that they're an artist. Someone whose art is informed by not having gone through the traditional ways of becoming an artist, I needed to create my own path, in which I did. So what informs the things that I do is based on how I've conceptualized my own career to be like. And like I said, fortunately, we're in a space that is conducive for you to literally carve whatever path you want to carve for yourself. So what an exhibition means to an artist who understands the art world through and through is completely different to my idea and conceptualization of what an exhibition is. To me, essentially what an exhibition is, what it means to me, is showcasing work in a space where you can facilitate conversations in real time with real people. So the first time because I was showcasing, by the time you saw Hairitage, that was the third installment of the exhibition, right? The initial installation of the exhibition was had because I thought that this kind of work needed to be experienced for the first time when I'm putting it out in a space where I could engage with the audience, right? Because I was having conversations with people majority of the time, but also I was teasing what work I was working on, but I wasn't fully putting it out yet. I was telling people online that this is the kind of work I'm doing. Even when I put out some of the work, it didn't quite capture and represent the weight of the conversations I was having with people, because it's hard to sort of relay a conversation through one still image, right? And because the images represented a lot more than just photography, it represented a person's literal lived experience, a person's identity. So putting a picture online didn't do it justice. It didn't do the conversations justice. So having an exhibition was a way of me engaging with an audience as to what this work actually means. So when I launched Hairitage through the exhibition that happened here, it was for that purpose. So the art world would call that an exhibition. And I think I also used the word exhibition because I was like, okay, this is what this thing is called. So I'll use it that. But the reason why I did it was because I needed to have these engagements in a real space so that I could make sure that the work is not misinterpreted whenever I decide to put it out online after the exhibition, so that people understand what we mean by heritage. And word of mouth is a real thing. And I think after that exhibition, the conversation started being had even outside of the exhibition, when I had the opportunity to actually tell people this is what this project means to me, but this is what this project also means to the people whose stories I was able to document, so that it doesn't get misconstrued, it doesn't get misinterpreted, it doesn't get misrepresented, because that was my thing. I didn't want the project to be misrepresented. The whole thing of how if you go to an exhibition and you make up your own interpretations, I didn't want that for my work. I needed people to understand that this is what this project means. So I did that through an exhibition, and the art world called it an exhibition. And then the second installment of the project was, now that the project has grown, I needed a bigger space. I needed a bigger team, I guess, to put it together. So even when I showcase Hairitage again, it was a way of me saying, hey, the project has grown so much. This is what we've done. I want to engage with you guys in a real space, and I want to engage with real people in a real space in real time, because social media dilutes a lot of things, and I don't want my work only to ever be consumed on social media. So having a space where people come and actually see the work and they engage with the work and the artist as well is very important for me. But the art world calls that an exhibition. So what an exhibition is to me is completely different. So by the time I did the third installment, then I was able to have the exhibition I had always envisioned, or the showcasing rather, I had always envisioned for myself, for the work that I am doing, especially when it comes to Hairitage. So having different activities like the panel discussion, for example, was always such a significant aspect in my showcasing of the work for me within like an exhibition experience, right? But I was never able to do that in the first two exhibitions because I didn't have the resources, I didn't have the space, I didn't have the network to be able to do something like that. So because the project had grown so much and the community had grown so much, it also created its own resources and its own network, in its own ideal network that I've always wanted. So I was able to have like a panel discussion, for example, and the purpose that the panel discussion served was having these conversations in a space where the audience would be, the Hairitage audience would be able to understand different perspectives when it comes to heritage, where different people are basically dissecting what heritage means to them in their own different interpretations, and I had nothing to do with the discussions that were happening there. The creative workshop, for example, was another important element that I've always wanted to add into my exhibition experience, because for me an exhibition is an educational platform where people come in and they learn not only about the work that you're doing, but they come and they learn about everything in between what you're doing. So how the work was made, or how to put together an exhibition, what it means to being an artist, the resources that you need. So having a creative workshop that was able to facilitate all of those different conversations, but also an educational platform that where people who are part of the heritage community or part of my community as an artist are able to come and get and take something out of it, outside of them just coming and seeing and viewing your work and then going back home, right? There needed to be substance attached to my work, and I think giving people information that they needed for their own artistic disciplines. So that's what an exhibition means for me. In a sense, it's a holistic kind of understanding of the work, but it's also a platform where people can be educated on different things that contribute towards whatever it is that they're building as individuals, whether they're an artist or not. So my exhibition facilitated things where you didn't have to be an artist to enjoy it. Like if you're someone who was building a business, or if you're someone who was just curious about the world of art, or curious about the things that whoever was coming to talk about was talking about, you could come and take something out of it. So that's what an exhibition means for me. So when I was having this exhibition, it needed to showcase the growth, but it also needed to be everything that I've always envisioned my exhibition to be. And it was definitely different to any other exhibition where an artist would put together, because for them an exhibition is something different. So if it's a learned artist who's coming to my exhibition, they probably don't see it as an exhibition, they probably see it as something else, and that's also fine. So I don't think for me it means the solo exhibition means anything but what I've just said. I don't think it puts me in a different category than anyone else. I don't think it signifies anything about my art outside of the fact that I was able to showcase my art in a space that was accessible, in a space that was free, where people didn't have to pay anything to come through, because that was a very important aspect for me as well. Like it needed to be in a space that was central to everyone, not just Rhodes student. It needed to be accessible to everyone who didn't have the resources to pay. Like if you wanted to just come and view the work and go home, you didn't have to pay anything to come through, right? So those were the things that sort of identified my exhibition, or that's what an exhibition meant to me, like showcasing work, but it needed to be more than just the art. And it's nothing outside of that. Yeah.
I think there's just the beauty in how you sort of your art educates through experience. Wait, is that recording?
It is recording.
Oh, your art like educates through experience. You know, it's not just re-educating Black people about their hair and how they should view their hair, but also it educates the westernized perspective and ideology over that they have on Black people. Do you understand? And that is like something I really appreciate because, you know, now we're moving forward. The whole concept is just so like marvelous. Like it's, who thinks of these things? Lithemba. And then, what is like? How has your process? I think you answered that question. You low-key answered a lot of the questions that I had before I asked them.
Ish.
So now I'm like stuck.
Ish. Sorry.
Now I'm literally stuck. Right? What's next? What do I do?
Any questions from the floor?
Any questions from the floor? Wait, you need to ask that one more time.
The question is, when did you build up the confidence to actually execute this vision that you had on, you know, making Hairitage a whole thing? You know, because everybody showed up, everyone, I'm talking about the audience, even the audience was just like, yeah, we're going to participate in this. So when did you gather up that confidence and that security in yourself, as, you know, because you did say you don't feel like you're an actual artist or you're not a traditional artist. So when did you finally gather that confidence to be like, you know what, I'm actually going to do this. I'm going to showcase my work confidently. So how did you execute that?
Yeah.
I think it was when I had the conversation with Arden. So Arden's right here. I don't know if you've seen this picture here. So I met Arden in 2022, and like again, this was before I started shooting photography for Hairitage. This was when I was still having conversations with people. So just to give you context, these conversations, right, spanned from 2019 till 2022. So from 2019 till 2022, Hairitage was literally just conversation based. It wasn't anything but just talks with people. So I was just experimenting with the visualization of the idea in my head. I think from 2021, where I was thinking more or less how this would look like in a visual depiction, right? But I hadn't set anything in stone as of yet. So when I met Arden in 2022, when I decided that, okay, I think I'm going to shoot for this project. But even then, I wasn't solid in my decision of shooting. I was still back and forth. Am I doing it? Am I just keeping it conversation? What's going to happen? I met Arden in 2022 during the National Arts Festival. So Arden was a friend of a friend. So I met Arden while she was still in the transition of going from like a male identifying body to a female identifying body. And Arden was telling me a story of how, because she still exhibited very masculine presenting features, right? Because she was still in the process of transition and she hadn't successfully gone through the physical transition or the physical change where even from afar you'd identify this person as a female. From afar you'd still very much identify this person as a male identifying person because of the masculine features that she still exhibited at the time of me meeting her, right? So I met Arden and she was telling me the story of how she was undergoing this transition, and she was still very much concerned that she was so masculine presenting and people were misgendering her and were misinterpreting her for someone that she wasn't anymore. She had even completely changed her name at that point.
So obviously there's the visual aspect, or rather, not the visual aspect, the video aspect of Hairitage, right? With obviously everyone's individual heritage. Is there a link between that and you, I guess, diving or going towards becoming a filmmaker, as you mentioned earlier? How do you link those together while still keeping the whole personal aspect of heritage and the person's heritage? Thank you.
Thank you, Junaid.
Yes, definitely. I mean, Hairitage in fact is a multimedia project. So there's the photography, I'm in the process of doing a documentary. I'd showcased the first documentary at the first exhibition, and I showcased the documentary at the second exhibition as well. So there's a documentary aspect to Hairitage as well, where we actually sit down and record the conversations that we're having with everyone, or people who have hair stories to share. We record those conversations and we've put a documentary together. Yes, it's just that for the first time I didn't showcase that documentary because it didn't feel ready for this particular exhibition. So even the documentary side of what I'm doing ties into the filmmaking that I eventually want to get into. I did say that I wanted to do a lot more documentaries. So this is me just experimenting. I'm building the skill, and it ties into the overall idea of being a filmmaker. I think even with the videos that you're talking about that specifically talk about that particular person's hair story, I'm experimenting a lot with different elements there. So things like sound design, for example, in the video aspect of those things, like some of those sounds that you guys are hearing there, they're not original sounds. Like we had to create those sounds from scratch, like the water, the wind, how the hair moves, and all these different sounds that you're hearing. The sheep in Uviwe's video, like that's not the sound from the actual video, even though you're seeing sheep there. I almost said ships. Even though you're seeing sheep there, like these are different elements that I'm learning and skills that I'm acquiring in terms of how to do sound design, the editing. Like I'm trying to create a visual language in terms of my editing. Like Uviwe's video, for example, that specific color grading, it took a while to get that specific color grading, or to understand how to create that specific kind of color grading. Shaningwa's video as well, like there's a specific grading that I'm trying to carve for myself, which speaks to the visual language I'm creating for myself as a filmmaker, which adds into the overall idea of Hairitage as well, because like I said, the still images don't complete the story that I'm trying to tell. Having these conversations, for me, they complete the Hairitage story. Exhibitions complete the Hairitage story. Documentaries complete the Hairitage story, because you get to see far deeper into this person's story outside of just the image that you're looking at the exhibition. So videos, podcasting, the literature side of it, like it's very, very important to me, and they all tell one overall story. So we're eventually actually getting into a point where I want to have a movie based on Hairitage, where we're going to be using all of the stories that people tell on the documentary, as those are going to basically be the narratives for each individual's character. So if we're having a documentary and Uwe is talking about a particular story, that story that she tells on the documentary will inform like a specific character's sort of narrative within that film that we'll be doing. So there's going to be a documentary, there's going to be a movie, maybe even one day we'll have like a proper book, which is, I think the journal is an entry point into us getting into the literature side of Hairitage, and Hairitage also just being integrated into academia now, is like a process of us getting into academia, but also actually getting into literature, getting into a point where Hairitage is going to be a point of study even 100 years from now. So all these things speak into the overarching theme of what this project touches on. I don't think there's a singular way of telling a story. So Hairitage is where I'm exploring all the different ways of telling like a singular story. So yeah.
What a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for allowing us in your space. Thank you for allowing me to meet Izzy. I don't know how to say your name in full.
Lukwaito. You know how to say it.
Lukwaito.
Yeah, there you go.
Teacher.
Lukwaito.
There you go.
Lukwaito. There we go.
Yeah.
Nziweni. Nziweni.
Yeah.
There you go. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for being here. Thank you for choosing Irie Talks. Don't forget Lithemba Nziweni. I'm so sorry.
It's okay. It's Nziweni.
Nziweni.
Yeah, there you go.
Lithemba Nziweni.
Yeah.
He's a marvelous photographer, conceptual artist, filmmaker, creative director, and just an overall genius at its best. Kanye West ain't got nothing on him. Just saying, fight me. I don't want to wrap the show up. Thank you for watching. This has been Irie Talks, and like I always say, I'm not wrong, I'm not right, I am just a different Dolly.
And cut.
Oh,
I'm just a different Dolly. Did you hear that?